Hey, today we're going to take a look at how to install a farmhouse sink. I just did this in my own house. This is my own house. And I wanted to give some instruction. I know there's a lot of people, these are kind of popular right now. And I want to give some instruction on how I did it. Not necessarily the right way, but this is how I did it. Alright guys, here's a quick look at what my kitchen looked like before. Now we'd already done a little bit of work to it. We'd painted the cabinets basically and put new knobs on it and stuff since moving in 8-10 years ago, whenever it was now. And we put that little backsplash in the back. Here's our old sink. Look at our old sink. And luckily, I didn't measure it, but luckily the distance from the back to the front worked out for me. Just barely, but luckily it worked out. And make sure when you're looking at your sink, you want to measure that threshold between the lip of the new sink and where your old sink was, so you know that you have enough material back there. And now some sinks have clamps on the bottom. Mine didn't. It was just sitting on top and was caulked in. But you're going to want to make sure you don't have any clamps underneath holding the sink to the countertop. And one of the first things you want to do is go ahead and unhook the water lines, hot and cold. Make sure they're turned off first, and make sure they don't leak. Mine had a little persistent leak that I later had to take care of. But first thing to do is disconnect those two lines and disconnect your drainage pipe, which you're going to have to go from a 2 pipe on mine. Mine was a 2 drain down to a 1 drain, and I had to make a couple runs to Lowe's to figure out what I needed, but I eventually got it figured out. Now you want to take your old trusty razor blade and run that around the edge to break up that caulk that your sink should have, or my sink had, that's holding it, essentially gluing it to the countertop. I had to run around the edge a couple times to make sure I really got it cut loose. The hard part was the back part, trying to get a razor blade around the back of it, but eventually got it loose. Mine popped right out after I got all that caulk cut away. Now to clean up the countertop a little bit, I had this plastic scraper which was made scraping old caulk out of corners, or it had this little flat piece for the flat areas, and I don't have to worry about it tearing up the countertop, even though I am going to cut part of it up. Now once we got most of that caulk scraped away, I put down some painter's tape so I didn't have to draw directly on my countertop in case I didn't draw it in the right spot. And also the painter's tape helps that countertop from splintering upwards. I used a saw that the teeth went down, so every time it would cut, it was in the downstroke, so as it wasn't trying to bring up any of those fibers upwards and splinter out the countertop. Now I used my jigsaw for the top part because it was thin enough, but on the front, since you do have to cut out the whole front of the counter, I used the reciprocating saw here to just cut the rest away. Now since there's a lip on this farmhouse sink, and this is one that mounts over top of the counter, since I didn't want to have to put a new counter on altogether, you have to cut away a little bit of the lip on the front so that it sits flush on the cabinetry. So I did the same thing here and marked it with painter's tape and drew on the painter's tape, and then cut away that little lip that was on the sink, and I just did the same amount on the countertop here so that it would sit flush. And here's what it looked like after you cut that. See, now you can see that it'll sit flush against that, in between the 2 little notches. After doing some test fitting, I had to go back and notch out a little bit of corner there because it was interfering with the sink and holding it off more than I wanted it. You might have to do your own little tweaking to make sure your sink fits. When I slid the sink in, I went ahead and ran a bead of caulk around the back and just let it sit on that as I ran it in, since I couldn't get the caulk gun back there to do it after it was installed. I would suggest getting some help to lift these things because they're quite heavy. Now I took that same painter's tape that I used for drawing the lines and I ran it down the side of the sink after I got it installed. And I kept it an even amount away from the sink so that when I caulked it, it'd have a nice even caulk line around each side of the sink. I hope this little tutorial helps somebody get the courage up to install it themselves in their own home. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Please comment below what's your favorite upgrade in a home. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 3, let's switch this up.